You know that highly specific um, electric feeling right before a live musical performance begins?
Oh yeah, when you're sitting in the audience, the house lights dim, the stage lights come up.
Right, and your brain is subconsciously scanning the physical setup on the platform. Like if you see 50 microphones lined up on massive tiered risers, your nervous system actually braces itself.
Because your body is preparing for a change in air pressure. You're instinctively getting ready for a wall of sound.
Exactly. But consider what happens when you look at that same stage and you see like a single wooden stool and one lone microphone.
Your heart rate adjusts in a completely different direction.
Yeah, the tension drops.
Yeah.
You lean forward in your seat. You basically prepare to be pulled into a whisper instead of being blown backward.
And that physical setup, that visual expectation, it completely alters the communal experience before a single note is even played.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we have a really unique mission for you. We are cracking open some pretty extensive notes and analysis on church worship dynamics.
Specifically looking at the fierce debate between the massive powerhouse full choir versus the intimate, stripped-down acoustic setup.
Right. And our goal today is to unpack the hidden mechanics of vocal team building. We're going to look at what it actually takes to construct these completely different sonic environments.
And why the style of music fundamentally changes how a community interacts with the people on stage. It's a debate that touches on acoustics, psychology, human ego, you name it.
Because it's never just about the songs an organization chooses to play. So whether you are a working musician, a frequent churchgoer, or just someone who is fascinated by the invisible levers of crowd psychology, this deep dive is going to completely change how you listen to live communal music.
It really is. Because the architecture of the sound itself manipulates the emotional weight of a room.
Okay, let's unpack this. Going through our sources today, the core debate usually starts with people arguing over which format is inherently better.
Right, the classic choir versus acoustic battle.
But the notes establish a much more pragmatic baseline. Basically, they state, there is no wholly or fundamentally wrong format for worship music. We're just reporting what the sources say here, but it all comes down to purpose and preparation.
Yeah, the biggest mistake any leadership team makes is assuming one sonic footprint is inherently superior or more sacred than another.
Right.
The effectiveness of the music is entirely dependent on what the group is trying to achieve in that specific moment. Like, are they trying to mobilize a crowd, or are they trying to create a space for quiet introspection?
And the tools you use for those two goals are vastly different. So let's start at the most complex end of the scale, the heavyweight of the musical spectrum, the full church choir.
We really have to start here because understanding the sheer mechanical difficulty of coordinating a massive choir helps us appreciate why so many modern organizations run in the opposite direction.
Totally. And, I mean, let's be honest, we have all witnessed the stereotype of a bad choir. Our sources don't shy away from this at all.
Oh, definitely not.
It's that chaotic, muddy barrage of sound where it feels like 40 people are just fighting for the microphone. As an audience member, it's like being trapped in a crowded room where everyone is shouting over each other.
Yeah, it's overwhelming in the worst way.
Right. So you'd think the square one fix for that kind of chaos is purely technical, like better soundboards, more monitors,
Yeah.
maybe better microphone placement.
But reading through these notes, it seems like the actual baseline for fixing a broken choir is entirely psychological.
The sources are really emphatic about this. Before anyone even steps up to a microphone, the choir has to understand that they are acting as one single organism.
Right. They cannot be a collection of 40 individual soloists who just happen to be standing next to each other.
Because if you have 30 people who all want to be the star, who are all pushing their own unique vocal tone to the front of the mix.
You don't have a choir, you have a shouting match.
Exactly. You have to systematically strip the ego out of the room before you can even begin to tune an instrument.
And the analysis points out that doing this requires a ruthless level of rehearsal discipline, specifically regarding something called blend.
Blend, right.
Yeah, blend is basically the holy grail of choir dynamics. To understand how difficult this is, we have to look at the physics of the human voice.
Okay, lay it on me.
Well, your mouth is essentially an acoustic chamber. If you have 40 people singing the word grace and say 10 of them are shaping their mouths wide, 10 are shaping their mouths tall, and 20 are doing something in between.
You're getting all those clashing frequencies.
Exactly. You are producing dozens of clashing resonant frequencies. The sound waves actually collide in the air, creating what's known as phasing.
And to the human ear, That phasing sounds like a harsh, muddy buzz.
Right. So to fix it, they literally have to be taught to shape their mouths the exact same way.
Down to the millimeter.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sopranos, altos, and tenors have to match their vowels, their breathing, their cutoffs.
They have to start the consonant of a word at the exact same millisecond.
Which requires an immense amount of repetitive, highly unglamorous work behind the scenes. It is essentially an exercise in acoustic conformity.
And that requires a very specific type of leader. You can't run a democratic process when you are trying to align 40 clashing sound waves.
No, definitely not. You need a director or a vocal coach who completely commands the room. But the sources emphasize a really interesting duality here.
Yeah, they need the musical ear of a dictator, someone who can hear a single alto going flat in a sea of 30 people.
Right.
But they also need the relational authority of a spiritual guide. That duality is crucial because of the ultimate purpose of the group.
And the analysis is pretty brutal on this point. The entire function of the choir is to serve the congregation.
Yes, if the matching outfits, the intricate choreography, or just the sheer spectacle of the performance starts to overshadow the actual message of the music, the choir has failed.
It ceases to be a communal experience and basically becomes a concert. But let me push back on the viability of this whole operation for a second. The logistics here sound like an absolute nightmare.
Oh, they are.
We are talking about routing dozens of microphones, running massive mixing consoles, and scheduling exhausting rehearsals for dozens of volunteers who, all have day jobs and families.
Right.
In an era where you can just hire a tight 5-piece band and use backing tracks, is the headache of a massive choir really worth it today?
Well, what's fascinating here is the payoff is found in the physical reality of acoustic energy.
Okay, how so?
Yes, the logistics are heavy, but having 30 or 40 people singing the exact same truth in perfect harmony with unified vowels carries a massive spiritual and sonic weight.
Oh, because they're physically moving the air in the...
Exactly. A 5-piece band with a backing track pushes sound through a speaker. A choir of 40 human bodies physically displaces the air in the room. It creates a frequency footprint that just wraps around the audience.
It's that physical embrace we talked about at the beginning. It's a wall of sound, but a welcoming one. And there's a visual component to this as well, right? When you are standing in a congregation and you look up at the stage and see dozens of ordinary people who look just like you, representing different ages and backgrounds unified in one purpose, it creates an undeniable sense of local community.
Absolutely. The choir isn't just projecting a performance at you. Their sheer numbers act as a visual cue that this song belongs to the entire room. They're actively pulling the congregation into the mix.
It democratizes the music.
It does, but as the sources note, there is a very real ceiling to this. Not every organization has a massive stage, a massive budget, or 40 willing volunteers.
Right, which means a lot of groups eventually find themselves migrating to the complete opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah, scaling all the way down.
If the massive communal ship of the choir relies on density and sheer numbers, what happens when we strip all that acoustic protection away? The notes spend a lot of time breaking down the mechanics of the acoustic set.
This is the naked truth of the acoustic setup. It's the classic vibe you find in prayer meetings, youth group nights, smaller church plants, or during highly specific, reflective moments in a larger service.
To me, moving from a 40-piece choir to just a single acoustic guitar and a vocal is like walking a tightrope without a net.
That's a great way to put it.
When you have a massive choir, it's a tapestry. You can't see the frayed edges. You can hide behind the wall of sound. But the moment you strip it down to one instrument, every micro vibration, every slight breath, every tiny pitch variation is amplified.
It is ultimate vulnerability. You lose all acoustic camouflage. And that vulnerability fundamentally changes the power dynamic in the room.
How so?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, a choir projects power from the stage. An acoustic set, because of its inherent fragility, sits with the congregation.
I see.
When the volume drops that significantly, the audience feels this psychological compulsion to lean forward and fill the silence themselves. It creates a deeply intimate, raw environment.
And the flexibility is unmatched. The notes highlight how an acoustic setup gives the leader incredible agility.
Right, because pivoting a massive group is basically impossible.
Exactly. If you have a massive choir and a full band, and the speaker suddenly decides the room needs to linger on a quiet thought, or they want to spontaneously change the key of the song, pivoting 40 musicians on the fly is a logistical nightmare. It's just going to crash.
Oh, completely.
But a single acoustic guitarist can follow a spontaneous flow in a heartbeat. They can slow down, speed up, or drop out entirely.
That agility comes at a steep price, though. The sources flag a major misconception here.
The danger of total vocal exposure.
Yes. A lot of leadership teams assume that an acoustic set is the easy option because there is less gear to manage, but playing with fewer elements actually demands far more musical precision.
Because there's nowhere to hide. If a singer in a choir forgets a lyric, 39 other people cover them up.
Exactly.
If the acoustic leader misses a pitch or flubs a chord, every single person in the room hears it echoing off the walls.
It requires a level of exactness that a massive, loud band can often fake their way through, by just turning up the distortion or burying mistakes in the drum mix. An acoustic set unmasks the sound completely.
So we have the dense sweeping power of the choir and the raw, exposed agility of the acoustic set. If you're a worship leader or a musical director listening to this right now, this is where you feel the friction.
Yeah, you're caught in the middle.
You want the emotional richness of multiple voices, but you want the agility and intimacy of a smaller group. So how are modern bands fixing that without hiring a 40-piece choir?
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. The sources point to a modern compromise that tries to capture the best of both worlds, the duet format.
Right, the duet.
This dynamic has dominated modern worship music over the last decade. You see it constantly in groups like Elevation Worship or Bethel Music, where you typically have a male and a female leader actively sharing the vocal responsibilities.
They aren't just assigning one person as the perpetual lead and the other as a background singer. They are passing the baton back and forth.
Exactly. It gives you incredible agility because the physical footprint on stage is small, but it introduces the profound emotional richness of harmony.
Because of the frequency spectrum, right?
Right. From a purely acoustic standpoint, a male and female voice singing together fills out the frequency spectrum beautifully. You get the rich, resonant depth of the lower register and the soaring highs simultaneously.
The notes detail how they utilize call and response dynamics to build tension. One singer will ask a question musically, and the other will answer.
And then, for the emotional climax of the song, they hit these incredibly tight harmonies. The sources mention they usually sing a third above the melody.
Okay, break that down for us. Why a third above?
To visualize why a third is so emotionally effective, imagine the main melody as the floor you are standing on. The third, which is a specific musical interval above that main note, acts like the ceiling right above your head.
It encloses the sound.
Yes. It makes the frequency feel thick and three-dimensional to the human ear. They will often sing the exact same note in unison during a verse to build a sense of marching forward, and then suddenly split into that wide, three-dimensional harmony on the chorus to make the room feel like it's exploding open.
It's an incredible technique, but I want to look at the human element of this, because the sources call it chemistry, while I read it and immediately see a potential disaster zone.
The ego trap.
Yes. I'm picturing two massive vocal talents sharing the same stage. The natural human inclination is ego. Both singers want the spotlight. So singer A decides to throw in a complicated vocal run. Singer B hears that and decides to throw in an even more complicated vocal run over the top of it.
It just spirals.
Suddenly, they aren't passing the baton, they're actively trying to outsing each other. It turns communal worship into a competitive vocal battle.
And the moment that happens, the entire spiritual fabric of the room unravels. The notes are very emphatic about the inherent danger of the duet. It is a massive ego trap.
So how do you avoid it?
Executing this format requires pure musical humility.
You have to actively choose to step back.
You are singing primarily to make the other person shine. It requires intense, active listening. You have to monitor your own volume to ensure your partner's melody cuts through the mix.
Wow.
You have to listen to their phrasing, where they take a breath, how they articulate a consonant, and match it perfectly in real time. It is an exercise in immense restraint.
So we've dissected the mechanics of the three distinct styles.
Right.
We understand the acoustic conformity of the massive choir, the vulnerability of the acoustic set, and the harmonic restraint required for a duet.
Right.
The final piece of the puzzle is how leaders actually choose between them and orchestrate them without failing. Because taking a song that was written for an acoustic guitar and forcing 40 people to sing it isn't going to work.
No, it leads directly into what the notes refer to as the golden rule of arrangement and strategy. You cannot just copy and paste songs across these different formats.
Let's use a modern, highly syncopated pop worship track as an example. Syncopation is when the emphasis of the melody falls on the offbeat between the standard counts of the rhythm.
Right.
A solo singer can hit a syncopated rhythm easily because they control their own timing. But if you hand that sheet music to a 40-person choir,
It turns into absolute mud. When you have 40 amateur singers trying to anticipate an offbeat, human reaction time means you are going to get a millisecond of delay between the fastest singer and the slowest singer.
and that delay smears the rhythm.
Exactly. The golden rule is that choir arrangements must be tailor-made for the physical limitations of a large group. Agility is incredibly low, but impact is high.
Which means they need massive, straight, anthemic choruses. They need melodies that fall squarely on the beat so everyone can strike the note at the exact same time.
Yes. If you force a choir to sing like a nimble pop star, they sound sloppy. If you give them a broad, sweeping melody, they sound like an army.
The notes highlight a really fascinating technical detail about maximizing the impact of that army, actually. The assumption is that a choir's ultimate test is sheer volume.
But the true test of dynamic control for a massive group is knowing how to whisper just as effectively as they know how to explode.
Whispering in unison seems infinitely harder. You have to maintain breath control and pitch accuracy without relying on the sheer force of your lungs.
Anyone can yell, but getting 40 people to pull their volume back to a delicate, unified, pitch-perfect whisper, that creates a tension in the room that is absolutely electric.
It shows a level of discipline that commands the audience's attention.
It really does.
So what does this all mean? Synthesizing everything from our sources today, how does a church or an organization actually balance these dynamics? We have the explosive power of the choir, the intimate agility of the acoustic set, the three-dimensional richness of the duet. What is the ultimate verdict on how a leader navigates this?
The overarching verdict is a practical reality check. It's all about deeply understanding the current season and capacity of your community.
Meaning, you don't try to fake a massive wall of sound if you only have a handful of volunteers.
Precisely. If you are a new organization or you lack the infrastructure for massive rehearsals, leaning into the acoustic or duet realms is the smartest play. Master the intimacy. Master the agility. Do not overextend your technical boundaries.
But what if you do have the resources?
If your church is growing and you have the talent and the resources available, the sources argue that you should absolutely invest the time, the budget, and the headaches into building a choir.
Because of the unparalleled way it edifies the local body. It builds deep structural community within the ranks of the choir itself through all those grueling rehearsals, and then it projects that unity outward to the congregation.
But the final takeaway from the analysis grounds all of this acoustic science and group psychology in a very humbling reality. The quote from the notes is, "Technique serves the altar, and the altar serves God."
That puts the entire deep dive into perspective. All the matching of vowels, the acoustic guitars, the mastering of three-dimensional harmonies, none of it is the actual point.
No, it's not.
It is all just acoustic scaffolding to support the communal experience. The technique is a vehicle, not the destination.
Beautifully said.
So as we wrap up our journey today, here is your takeaway. The next time you are in a crowd, whether you are sitting in a church service, standing at a rock concert, or attending a community event, I want you to pay attention to the stage.
Look at how the physical number of voices up there is actively manipulating the emotional weight of the room.
Exactly. Notice when they use a massive wall of sound to overwhelm your senses. And notice when they strip all the camouflage away to pull you into a whisper.
It does raise one final crucial question that the sources barely touch on, though.
Oh, what's that?
We've talked extensively about how the human elements, the number of musicians, and the style of vocals shape the communal experience. But if these sonic setups are so incredibly sensitive to volume and frequency, how much is the actual physical architecture of the room quietly dictating your success or failure? Right. The height of the ceilings, the specific materials on the walls, the curvature of the auditorium. Before a single singer even opens their mouth, the room itself has already decided which of these musical styles will actually thrive and which will be swallowed alive.
That is definitely something to think about the next time you look at a stage and then look up at the ceiling. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, stay curious, and we'll catch you next time.